To avoid disturbing the flow of others. Also, any unauthorized recording or photography of the performance is prohibited. For a full list of concerts and events, visit music.sdsu.edu. Thank you for your support of the performing arts at San Diego State University. Enjoy.
Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me? Yeah. Great. I'm Arzu Oskal. I'm the chair of Arts Alive SDSU. We are a campus initiative to support art-centric research and project development. We are here today for a panel conversation in conjunction with the Oh My Gong Music Festival, featuring music from Central and West Java, Bali, Thailand, and the Philippines. We would like to begin the programming by acknowledging the Kumeyaay people, traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today, and pay our respects to their elders, past and present. Our Alive SDSU Discovery Series is an annual selection of faculty-led and university-produced art exhibitions, performances, film screenings that explore sociopolitical and cultural issues through the transformative lens and of the creative arts. The panel conversations allow us to explore the creative processes and give us an opportunity to hear directly from the creatives and scholars in regards to the cultural, social, and political movements that influence and inspire them. Our panelists tonight are Dr. Christina Sunardi. Christina Sunardi is an associate professor in the School of Music at the University of Washington and chair of Department of Dance. Her interests include performance, identity, gender, and spirituality in Indonesia. Dr. Meghan Hynson. She's an adjunct assistant professor of ethnomusicology at the University of San Diego, where she directs the Balinese gamelan ensemble and teaches courses in global music. And Professor Laurel Grinnell-Wilson. She is the director of the Javanese gamelan ensemble at San Diego State. She also directs the Javanese gamelan at Canyon Crest Academy, and she is the assistant director of the World Music in the Schools program at the Center for World Music. Moderated by composition graduate student Michael Jones, our guests tonight will explore concepts of gender identity and expression found through the arts, especially focused on performances in Indonesian music and dance. I would like to thank everybody who put this panel together. I know there's a lot of people working behind the scenes. Our Arts Alive SDSU production team are here. Thank you so much for everyone, as well as the SDSU leadership, the Campanile Foundation, and One SDSU for their support to Arts Alive SDSU. And before I hand over the mic to Michael, we invite everybody to check in through the QR codes provided on the walls so that we can keep track of attendance to our events and increase our chance of securing funding and support for future Arts Alive SDSU events. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Oh My Gong, a panel discussion featuring Dr. Christina Sunardi, Dr. Meghan Hynson, and Laurel Grinnell-Wilson. Tonight's discussion is presented with support from SDSU Arts Alive Discovery Series, the School of Music and Dance, the Mark Karwowski Fund, the Campanile Fund, Adams Endowment, and One SDSU. The discussion tonight has been designed to accompany the Oh My Gong Gamelan Festival that will be presented Sunday, April 16th. It runs from 2 to 5 p.m. It's free, open to the public, and we encourage you to come and bring your friends and family. Oh My Gong is a one-day festival celebrating Indonesian music and performing arts. This event will explore musical and cultural diversity and present court music of Central Java, community-based music of West Java, and diverse performance ensembles of Bali. By presenting a spectrum of performing arts traditions from Indonesia, this festival will explore broad cultural practices and beliefs within this region and how they are connected to the arts as an expression of society's values. The festival will feature dancer Winnie Michelstein, with the SDSU Javanese Gamelan Ensemble, and her father, E. Naomin Wenton, featured dancer with the Gamelan Merdu Kumala. Also performing will be many of Southern California's most renowned performers in the Indonesian arts with 5 unique gamelan ensembles. This evening, we'll begin with Laurel Grinnell-Wilson. And Laurel is the organizer for Oh My Gong and director of the SDSU Javanese Gamelan Ensemble. She currently teaches here at SDSU at University of San Diego and directs the Javanese Gamelan at Canyon Crest Academy High through the Center for World Music, where she is also the Assistant Director of World Music in the Schools program. Please welcome Laurel Grinnell-Wilson.
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to see all of you here today. I am just like bursting with anticipation. I know a lot of you are my students, and we've been kind of talking about this event coming, and I've been working with a really big team to bring this event to you, and I'm so happy it's finally here. I have some slides to share here. Whenever we're ready. So first, I know it's a little bit of business up here at the front. I'll try and cut out on some of the redundancy, but I do have some very important thank yous that I'd like to announce before we really get rolling. First of all, thank you to you, because having you here is just really going to make this evening a lot more exciting, knowing that we're talking to people that we can engage with, and we'd really love to hear your questions afterwards, no matter how simple or complex they might seem to you. So thank you for being here. We're going to unfold some of the intricacies of and relationships between Indonesian performing arts, gender, religion, and society. And I want to take a couple moments to say thank you to some people, especially the Arts Alive team. Thank you. They've been with me since the beginning, since we started thinking about Oh My Gong for the last 12 months. To here we are. Thank you, Arzu and Elizabeth, for all of your support and helping with the programs and everything. I really appreciate your camaraderie. Thank you. Also, a big thank you to the School of Music and Dance. I am so fortunate to work with a lot of really great people, including one of my mentors, Dr. Kevin Delgado, who's the director of the School of Music and Dance. I was once his graduate assistant back in the day when he was an educator, and now he's the director, and he's always been a huge support of me, so thank you, Kevin. I know you're not here, but I love you. And also thank you to Elvira Delgado, Nick Cherowitz, Anna Vasquez, and all of the sound and tech team and stage team. Thank you all so much. This is just today, getting the technology for this is awesome, and then the technology that we'll also need on Saturday is a big feat, so thank you so much for your continued commitment. Also, big thank you to our 2 main panelists, Dr. Christina Sunardi and Dr. Meghan Hynson. I am so excited to have both of you here talking about your contrasting scope of study, and really interested to see how they intertwine when we've heard your presentation. Thank you so much. We're lucky to have you. The whole reason I really wanted to do this event in the first place in this panel discussion is because of our very tight-knit gamelan community here in Southern California. We are very fortunate to have 3 absolute world-famous, world-class mentors. My mentor, Pakchoko Waluyo, E. Nyoman Wenton, a dancer, and his wife, also a dancer, Nanik Wenton. They have been teaching at CalArts, UCLA, and here, and Pomona, pretty much any university in Southern California, and it's because of the 3 of them that there is this huge community of gamelan supporters and gamelan lovers, and we are now out in the world teaching gamelan music like me and like Megan, and we are doing what we love because because of the support from our mentors. So it's really an opportunity on Saturday to get all of us together and be so thankful for each other and the community that we've created. I just want to give you a little bit of context for what you'll see on Saturday and for the discussion that you'll hear today between Christina and Meghan. So the idea was to feature a unique style of dance that we don't typically see in the United States, and that is a cross-gender dance where either a male dances a female dance or a female dances a male dance in the central Javanese tradition. And this is something that is probably more common in Indonesia than it is here, because here we're living gamelan through like this university and educational setting. So it was kind of born from that idea of presenting a unique dance. Now, as you know, Indonesia is an extremely diverse archipelago. There are thousands of islands, over 17,000 in fact, thousands of which are inhabited by unique culture groups that all have unique dialects and religious beliefs. And there are different types of gamelan instruments and gamelan traditions that are also scattered around these islands as well. So we're going to be focusing our discussion on the island of Java, and this is Central Java, you can see highlighted in red. We're going to be hearing from Christina speaking about West Java, and Megan's going to be discussing Bali, which is this little island right next to Java. So the big thing is Java is mostly Muslim religiously, and Bali is mostly Hindu. So even though we're talking about this commonality of cross-gendered dances, we have all sorts of other social and religious constructs that come into play when we're talking about that. The SDSU Javanese Gamelan is featuring the instruments of Central Java. So that's what the performance will be of on Saturday. And the music of Central Java is associated with the royal courts of Central Java that date back to the Majapahit Empire of the 1300s. So this is a very ancient tradition that is associated with royalty. So commonly the people who were performing this style of music were associated with the royal family. And so it was really had restricted access because of this. So the dance that we're going to be performing is this style of halus dance, or a very refined dance. So you can expect to see very precise and refined movements on the stage. And of course, this is going to be seen through the lens of a cross-gendered dance. So it will be the name of the dance is Beksan Plono Halus Sumyar, and Bakweni will be dressed as a man, and she is acting as the story of the dance is she is a prince who is very proud and seeking his beautiful princess. So it's kind of like a love story, and we'll see it through that lens of the cross-gendered dance. In the instance of the Central Javanese tradition, the concept of having a female dance, a male dance, or vice versa, could have been born out of something as simple as need, for instance, because we have that restriction of the royal family and the royal extended family being allowed to perform this tradition. It could have just stemmed from need. So having a dancer because of their skill and not because of their gender. But even if it was a simple choice for the royal courts to provide a cross-gendered dance in the kraton, or the royal palace, it's not a simple, it's not a simple thing to perceive, because to the audience and to the performer, there are so many hidden undertones of what it means for a woman to express herself as a man on the stage in this royalty kind of presence. So you will hear from Christina and Megan's discussions, and you will be looking at this concept through the lens of their two studies that they have been focusing on. And we'll be looking through the lens of dance, and we'll get this perception of gender and religion and other societal values. So I would like to hand it back over to our moderator so we can introduce Meghan. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dr. Christina Sunardi. Christina is an associate professor in the School of Music at the University of Washington and chair of the Department of Dance. She has been studying and performing Javanese music and dance since 1997 in both Indonesia and the United States, earning her PhD in music from the University of California, Berkeley in 2007. Her book, Stunning Males and Powerful Females, Negotiating Gender and Tradition Through East Javanese Dance, is about gender, power, and tradition, and draws on ethnographic fieldwork spanning from 2005 to 2007. Christina joins us via Zoom from Washington State. Please welcome Dr. Christina Sunardi.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this festival, and many thanks to Laurel and everybody who's organized the Zoom setup. I know it's really complicated to do these hybrid situations here, so it's really an honor to be present with you through Zoom here from Seattle. Let's see, I'm going to share my screen. I have some slides to show. So here is my presentation, and I'll put it on presenter view so it looks a little nicer. Here we are. Okay, great. So in kind of keeping with the theme of today's panel, I wanted to focus on gender, Islam, and East Javanese performing arts. And I write about what I'll be presenting about in my book quite a bit. And I also have a shorter chapter in an edited compilation that focuses more specifically on Islam. But it's been something that's been really important to me in my explorations of cross-gender dance performance in East Java. So when in Java, Indonesia, it is hard to forget that one is in a place where the majority of people are Muslim, including in Malang, East Java. Let me try to switch the slide here to the map. So you can see where Malang is on the map there. I had the honor of studying music, dance, and theater there in Malang. When you're there, it's hard to not see the many mosques and musholas, or prayer rooms, interspersed between homes and stores in villages and cities. It is hard not to hear the call to prayer emanating simultaneously from many mosques and musholas through loudspeakers, conveniently giving one a sense of the time of day. It is hard not to notice women wearing headscarves in various colors and styles. It is hard not to touch a tunic at a store specializing in Muslim fashion. It is hard not to internalize Arabic words that are sprinkled in spoken everyday Indonesian, the national language, and spoken everyday Javanese, a local language. Assalamualaikum, a friend calls out to announce their visit to your home. Waalaikumsalam, you respond. As mentioned, I conducted fieldwork in Malang from 2005 to 2006 and also in 2007. Since 2007, I've made several trips to continue studying with my teachers and to visit and to see more performances, although my last performance was in 2015. Gotta get back soon. While in Malang, I focused on gamelan music, which is a type of music that's played on an ensemble comprised mostly of gongs and keyed percussion instruments, as you saw in the previous slides. I also studied dance as well as theater accompanied by gamelan. Being in artistic circles in Malang, the presence of Islam was strong as in daily life. By far, most of the gamelan musicians and dancers that I consulted were Muslim, albeit of different degrees of piety. Muslims sponsored and attended performances, as you can get a sense of in this photo. It's kind of a close-up of one of the earlier ones. So you can see women wearing headscarves here, for example. Some performances were held for Muslim celebrations, such as circumcisions, to celebrate a boy's transition into adulthood. Performances were also held sometimes in explicitly Muslim spaces. For example, I attended a performance at an Islamic boarding school. In many cases, lessons, rehearsals, and performances were scheduled so as not to conflict with the call to prayer after sunset, at nightfall, and before sunrise. If a lesson, practice session, rehearsal, or performance, including performances that lasted well into the night or all night, did not end before the call to prayer at these particular times, a break was usually taken during the call. Strikingly, despite the prevalence of Islam in Malang, and despite Islam's prohibitions against cross-dressing, as well as taking on the gendered attributes of the opposite sex, it is not unusual for males to perform female-style dance and for females to perform male-style dance, which has led me to explore relationships between performance, the negotiation of gender norms, and approaches to Islam. My main argument in this presentation and in other work is that in complicating senses of masculinity and femininity through cross-gender dance performance and through their offstage lives, dancers and gamelan musicians in Malang contribute to the continuous cultural processes by and through which gender identities and approaches to Islam are continuously shaped. So I'd like to give a little background about East Javanese dance for those who might be new to it. East Javanese dance is characterized by male and female styles, as are dance forms associated with other regions in Indonesia. Although there are a range of male and female Javanese dance styles depending on Although there are a range of male and female Javanese dance styles, depending on regional style, character portrayed, and type of dance, in general, male styles feature wider, more open stances, higher arm positions, and larger movement volumes. And in general, female style dances feature narrower stances, lower arm positions, and smaller movement volumes. There are male and female styles of the East Javanese dances Beskalan and Remo. So this slide shows Beskalan Lanang, Beskalan in the male style, and Beskalan Putri, or Beskalan in the female style. And let's see, Remo is another dance. This is Remo in the male style, Remo Lanang, and Remo Putri, which is Remo in the female style. So when I was in Malang for my fieldwork, I was studying these dances, as well as male and female styles of East Javanese masked dance. So these are a couple of slides here showing male style dance and female style dance. And I'm the one in the mask with the female style dance. You can kind of recognize the hair a little bit there. Now, Beskalan, Remo, and mask dance have been performed in various contexts in Malang. Beskalan and Remo usually function as opening or welcoming dances that precede various types of performance, including types of theater, music, and/or dance. Usually, an individual, group, or institution hosts such performances to celebrate particular events, including weddings, circumcisions, anniversaries, birthdays, village purification ceremonies, particular days on the Javanese calendar, Indonesian Independence Day celebrations, and inaugurations. Beskalan, Remo, and mask dance are also performed in the context of competitions and festivals. Masked dances may be performed as independent dances, often as open or welcoming dances, or they may be performed as part of a masked dance drama, usually for the types of events I just mentioned. Beskalan, Remo, and mask dance are also performed for other reasons. For example, I observed Beskalan and a mask dance perform as entertainment during an agricultural meeting. The musicians and dancers I consulted were quite used to males performing female-style dance and females performing male-style dance. In some contexts, for some dances, performers assumed or even expected that the dance would be performed as a cross-gender dance. So prevalent was the convention in Malang. Performers also recognized that related to some dancers' individual personalities or body types, some males were better suited for female-style dance, and some females were better suited for male-style dance. In other words, performers recognized that the embodiment and expression of masculinity was not limited to males, and the embodiment and expression of femininity was not limited to females. At the same time, assumptions and constructions of masculinity and femininity in Malang were affected by dominant Indonesian ideologies. Drawing selectively from representations of gender and gender ideologies of earlier times, including representations of masculinity and femininity rooted in Javanese aristocratic, Orthodox Muslim, and Dutch colonial ideologies, dominant Indonesian ideologies mapped gender to biological sex in a 1-to-1 ratio, privileged heterosexuality, and constructed manhood and womanhood in particular ways. Since the 1940s, dominant discourses have encouraged males to be brave, strong, handsome, deep-voiced, and to act as leaders of their households, communities, and nation, all the while a more physically powerful, larger-looking male body type came to be held up as a model of manliness. This replaced a cultural preference given to a more slightly built, but spiritually potent and highly refined male figure. Following the Indonesian Revolution, which spanned 1945 to 1949, dominant ideologies of ideal female subjects have encouraged women to be refined, polite, quiet, and dedicated to the home and their social roles as wives and mothers. This contrasts with the roles that women have historically played and continue to play as soldiers, traders, social and political organizers, and leaders, among other roles. In creating public cultural space for dancers to embody the gendered attributes of the opposite sex through the performance of Beskalan, Remo, and mass dance as cross-gender dances, the dancers and musicians I consulted and observed played multiple social roles in regard to gender. On the one hand, performers were reifying dominant norms by articulating ideal constructions of male and female in terms of physical appearance, behavior, and sonic attributes established through established dance styles. On the other hand, performers were pushing at and redefining dominant constructions of gender by undermining a 1-to-1 mapping of biological sex and gender role. The prevalence of such gender negotiation through cross-gender dance in Malang, a place where the presence of Islam is so strong, has led me to think further about relationships between the performing arts, senses of gender, and approaches to the religion. For time, I'm going to kind of skip down and just get to kind of the meat of what I am sort of talking about here. And there's a couple of theoretical concepts that have been really helpful to my thinking, one of which is this idea of female masculinity, which Judith Halberstam writes about in a book. So this is this idea of masculinity that is expressed and produced and embodied by female-bodied individuals, and it's distinct and different from male masculinity. I also draw on the concept of male femininity by Tom Belstorff, which analogously is femininity that is produced and owned and embodied by males or male-bodied individuals. And then there's also this notion of contingent masculinity that Evelyn Blackwood presents in her work, which is this idea of the way that gender is expressed can depend very much on the context. So if somebody's in context A, they express their gender a certain way, and when they're in context B, they may express it very, very differently. So these ideas have been very useful in my research and sort of thinking about gender expression through performance in East Java. And I should mention that the sort of, again, kind of the main argument here that I'm looking at is this idea of performers, both musicians and dancers, complicating notions of gender through their participation in performance. So how are they doing this? In a variety of ways, and again, in doing so, they were also expressing these different approaches to Islam. So some performers separated religion from art. The musician Komari, as we see here, asserted that there are separate times for prayer and separate times for art, and that, quote, it was not art if these two activities were joined, unquote. Komari did not have any problems with being Muslim and playing music. He said that his feelings are not hurt if other Muslims say that playing music is not permitted. He believes that it is up to, quote, the one above, implying God. Komari's views on piety and the performing arts are important because as a Muslim musician who accompanies dances performed as cross-gender dances, like other Muslim musicians who do so, he was participating in and contributing to the expression and cultural production of masculinities and femininities that complicated dominant norms. So let's watch a short video in which Komari is playing. He is accompanying Remo Putri, a female-style dance being performed by male-bodied dancers. The video starts with footage of the dancers and then goes to the musicians. And I should mention too, I recognize that the terminology kind of around gender has changed since the time that I've published my work. And so kind of thinking about the dancers as male-bodied might not necessarily be the most appropriate, but we could maybe think of them as dancers who were assigned male at birth. Some of whom may very well identify as waria, who are males who dress and live as females, but I didn't interview each of the dancers in this video clip, so I don't know how they identified off stage. So this video starts with footage of the dancers and then goes to the musicians, and in this section of the dance, a popular song has been inserted into the choreography, so you might be able to hear keyboard and bass in addition to the sounds of the gamelan. And the song is called Bokong Si Mok, which means sexy butt. So you might kind of notice that in the dance movements. Okay, so I'll stop it there for time. But you can see Komari was having a good time in that performance. And by participating as a musician, he was contributing to the articulation of male femininity, a complex sense of gender that complicates dominant norms. Now, some performers justified their artistic activities as their professions, which was another way of separating religion from artistic activity. For example, the vocalist and dancer Sri Handayani, pictured here, did not have a problem with her religion, she identified as Muslim, and her profession as an artist. Responding to my question as to whether she ever felt any incompatibility with her religious beliefs, she explained, quote, "No, that is our work, you know. Why should we feel ashamed? Why? It is our work, right? Our work in order to eat, right? As far as religious matters, that is between us and the one above. Yes, so work and religion cannot be all mixed up. The important thing is that we are right, yes? Work a job that is halal," unquote. In using the word halal, that which is permitted or allowed by Islam, Sri was evoking Islam in order to legitimize her profession as an artist. This is a striking assertion for a number of reasons, one of which is the immoral, licentious stereotypes of female singer-dancers in Java. Invoking Islamic discourse, she was insisting on the rightness of her profession. Secondly, one type of art that she performed was Ngremo Tayub, a male-style dance, and she's pictured here in a Ngremo Tayub outfit. The Ngremo Tayub is a sub-style of the male style of Ngremo that is almost inevitably performed by females. And here I have a slide that compares a typical costume for men performing Ngremo Lanang and women performing Ngremo Tayub. And you can see how the women create this really interesting, complex sense of masculinity through their makeup and costume, especially when compared to the male dancers who perform male style Ngremo. So as far as Sri goes, notice the style of her top and the way that she has it fastened. It accentuates the hourglass shape of her figure. Also, you notice she has on a little vest that shows her arms and the top part of her shoulders, which are rather erotic in a Muslim majority context in Java as compared to the male style dancers' long sleeves that cover his entire arms. Also, her makeup and jewelry is recognizably feminine, particularly in the style of her eye makeup. It's kind of hard to tell in this picture, but she has on false eyelashes to, accentuate the femininity of her eye makeup. And she's used finer lines to draw on her mustache and her, to accentuate the shapes of her eyebrows. So we can compare this to the male dancer who has really thick eyebrows and a kind of thicker lines for his mustache and the line below his lip. Really heavy use of blush on his cheeks, on his forehead, and on his chin. And then he's also used an eyeliner pencil to draw on really thick sideburns on the side of his face. So we can see how a woman dancer for Ngremo Tayub has really made an effort to look a little different. And I find that this juxtaposition of masculinity and femininity when in the Ngremo Tayub outfit is really unique and really striking. One of the arguments that I make in my book is that the women dancers they're not trying to look like men, they're not trying to pass, but they're trying to produce a certain sense of masculinity to show that they can be powerful just like men. Sri, like other Ngremo Tayub performers, also undermined a clear separation between maleness and femaleness through Ngremo Tayub, not only in terms of their costuming, but also when they would sing in the dance, because when they sing, as is common for many Ngremo dancers to do, you can hear the sound of their female voices emanating from this sort of male style. There's other differences, but for time, I'll just show a video clip so you can see what Ngremo Tayub looks like and kind of get a sense of what it sounds like hearing the women performers performing in this sort of quasi-male dress. Okay, so you can get a sense of that. It's really incredible, and I hate to stop it, but for time I will. And I'm also looking at the time too, and I want to be mindful to not go over 30 minutes. You can see it'd be very easy for me to talk for hours and hours about this. So I'm going to kind of go through the rest of my slides a little more quickly here. So we've heard from a couple of artists who, really talked about the separation between kind of Islam and their work, or, Islam and art as a way to, negotiate being Muslim and artists, or just to be Muslim and artists. It was, kind of natural for them. I also spoke to artists assigned male at birth who were active in Ludruk theater as dancers or as actors. And Ludruk is a type of East Javanese theater that has historically been performed just by males. In Malang, it continues to be mostly performed by males, although in other cities, it's more common for females to perform female parts. And the males who perform female roles are called Tandak Ludruk or Seniwati. And I spoke to a number of Tandak Ludruk or Seniwati, including one person who identified as a man in his daily life and as a Muslim. And he talked about how, he talked about the importance of having a flexible and tolerant approach to the religion. And that, he was a Seniwati, but he also participated in the 5 prayers a day. And he didn't have any problems being a Muslim person who performed female-style dance. And he also recognized the femaleness in his own self, talking about how he had to kind of find in his own self the way to coquettishly move the neck or to smile when performing female-style dance, and talked about feeling like a woman as he was heading onto the stage. So he talked about that, and he talked about support in his community, which was predominantly Muslim, that people supported his career and asked him where he was going, or are you performing tonight? And so he found that. I did also interview an artist who identified as a waria, which is a culturally sensitive term to talk about males who dress and live as female in Indonesia, and it's a pretty well recognized category of gender in Java. And I did speak with a waria artist who didn't find necessarily the same degree of acceptance, and talked about discrimination against waria and the importance of having the stage as an outlet to embody one's sort of female heart and sensibility. This person also did identify as a Muslim, and also talked about wearing a headscarf when they go into a mosque, for example. So taking on a sort of feminine Muslim attire when going into a mosque. That person, Mama Samsu was their name, also talked about the importance of propriety, and really kind of spoke to respectability politics. And she talked about how she really doesn't like the fashion show that is part of a lot of contemporary Ludruk performances, which is pictured here. And you can see the outfits are very often internationally inspired. And she didn't care for the short skirts and the tight dresses, because she thought that in Ludruk it was more appropriate for dancers to show the refinement of Javanese womanhood through traditional dress, like is pictured here. So I highlight that in my work to show that this is one way that artists like Mama Samsu were really countering a lot of negative stereotypes about waria as sex workers and being licentious as well. She's really speaking to the importance of being respectable Javanese women, or projecting Javanese womanhood. So to conclude, I've just spoken about a few ways that artists sort of negotiate being Muslim with their work as art, and my main argument has been in complicating senses of gender on stage and off stage. Artists in Malam were complicating notions of Islam and what it means to be Muslim in Indonesia, and they were very much showing, or they were manifesting, this notion that the anthropologist Timothy Daniels calls the Islamic spectrum in Java, where there's just a real spectrum of ways of being Muslim, from very orthodox to not so orthodox, and expressing piety in a variety of ways. And that's something that he and many other anthropologists and other scholars of Javanese religion have been really interested in for for many decades now. So this is kind of my contribution to that scholarly conversation. So I think I'll leave it there, and thank you so much for listening, and happy to get into more details during the Q&A.
Thank you, Christina. Our next guest is Dr. Meghan Hynson. Meghan is an adjunct assistant professor of ethnomusicology at the University of San Diego, where she directs the Balinese Gamelan Ensemble and teaches courses in global music. Her primary research examines development and sustainability in Balinese shadow theater music, Gender Wayang, and issues of gender and sexuality in amongst the comedic cross-dressed characters of Balinese dance drama. Let's please welcome Dr. Meghan Hynson.
Thank you, and I just want to thank Laurel for putting on this and organizing this incredible festival, and for all of you coming out here today to attend this talk. It's really nice to follow after Christina, whose work has really kind of helped me frame and shape some of this work that this is newer work that I'm doing in Bali. So I stumbled on these comedic cross-dressers in Bali a couple years ago and undertook study, and I read a lot of Christina's work, so it's just an honor to present following her today. So let me just pull up my presentation. Yeah, and I think that you'll find that what I'm doing in Bali has some differences, but also you'll draw a lot from what Christina just presented to help contextualize some of these ideas. So, in Bali there's over 26 types of gamelan that are used for a variety of purposes that blur the sacred and the secular, including accompanying dance and shadow puppet theater at temple ceremonies, or as a musical offering to the gods and ancestors at various life cycle rituals. And while there's many different ways to discuss gender and religion and identity with regard to gamelan, I'm not necessarily going to be discussing gamelan today. Oh, okay, there we go. But keeps. Technical difficulty. Should I just unplug it? Sticking. All right. I'm not necessarily going to be talking about gamelan today. However, I will be discussing some of the cultural practices and beliefs connected to and expressed and perhaps transgressed in the wildly popular contemporary dances in which individuals are cross-dressing to portray female characters and drawing on lewd jokes and sexual innuendo for comedic entertainment. So my paper presentation today is called An Artistic Space for the Balinese Banci. Christina spoke about the word waria, which is men who dress and live as women, and the Banci term, which I'll discuss more thoroughly in my paper, is more of a derogatory term for these same people who inhabit this kind of sexual space. Comedic cross-dressers in contemporary Balinese dance drama. So I want to start my presentation tonight by watching a video example, just so you can get a sense of what it is I'm talking about. This video was taken in the summer of 2019 at an all-night Chalonarang dance, which takes place at the cemeteries in Bali, where my colleague, pictured here with a big smile on his face, Iwayan Sudirana, was drumming with the gamelan, and during the performance, this male dancer, and when I say male dancer, I'm talking about male-born dancer, cross-dressing as a female who's called a liku character in Balinese dance drama. I'll talk about the liku in a moment as well. with the stage name Gek Rempong. And they came out completely captivating the audience with their wild humor and sexual references. You can see a clip of the performance here. Please pay attention to the upper left corner of the screen where I have included some subtitles. I also like for you to just pay attention to some of the body language of this dancer, because as I will talk about, contrary to Christina's presentation, where a lot of the male dancers dressing as females would continue to embody female movements and female sort of body language, the male dancers dressing as female dancers in this context are not necessarily acting in a way that is typical of a female person in everyday society.
Sini, tuh yang tukang gongan lihat otot bodine cara Vespa, unik body Vespa, body gede coba tulis kenapa kan bisa sini? Apa wih? Kalau mau sama G, ayo di mana gitu lah? Prajani jijik, dasar laki-laki prajani jijik, pokoknya disuruh ke jujur ini masih aja.
Yeah, so you saw the sort of gyrating of the hips for a moment there. So I was stunned by the audience response and asked Iwayan Sudirana about this dancer after the show. Our discussion revealed a popular new trend in Bali of cross-dressing comedic characters in Balinese dance drama that led us to examine this trend and down on this research project. So drawing on interviews with some of the most famous comedic cross-dressing dancers, this paper comments on a number of things. It comments on significant changes in the production and consumption of Balinese dance drama, as this marks a development from serious to comedic entertainment in Balinese dance drama. It also comments on the lived experiences and subjectivities of the performers, and as Christina had mentioned, some of whom are male-identifying but dance as females, some are waria. And so I sought to kind of capture their lived experiences, many of whom are in everyday life are labeled as in-between gender or banchi, to explore how they negotiate tensions surrounding gender and sexuality and use cross-dressing to express their sexual identities and individual feelings of maleness and femaleness. And there's a wide range here. Also to examine how these dancers are confronting and shaping local, national, and global constructions of gender and sexuality through their highly visible and lucrative performing careers and social media presences. And as I'll discuss, these are some of the most well-paid artists in Bali today, which is very interesting to note. And also they have incredible social media followings, and so I'll talk about that. So with regard to religion, I want to start with the term babanchihan and the history of cross-dressing in Balinese dance as it fits within the development of Balinese dance and attitudes toward gender and sexuality. So throughout Indonesia, scholars have noted that transvestism and androgyny, or gender neutrality, are part of a centuries-old Hindu Javanese and Hindu Balinese imagery in which a third sex, or in-between gender, represents cosmic power. And this has been discussed by a number of people, including Christina. This is articulated in the Hindu philosophy of Ardhanarishvara, in which the Hindu deity Shiva is combined with his consort Parvati and is depicted as half male and half female, equally split down the middle. And you can see this here in the illustration. On the left here would be the Shiva, and on the right here would be Parvati. This concept is found in Bali, I've seen this term interpreted in another way, in the notion that God is composed of three genders: male, nara, female, swari, and half, or arda, a gender of both male and female characteristics. And this is also transferred into everyday society, in which certain individuals maybe have that are male may have very female characteristics, and vice versa. So this concept of Ardhanarishvara is found in Hindu art, dance, and ritual. However, attitudes toward homosexuality, transvestism, androgyny, and sexuality in everyday life continue to be stigmatizing and marginalizing. And there seems to be kind of a blurred line here where if you're someone who is male who dances a female role, you're often associated with being homosexual or transvestite or androgynous. In Bali, this is especially stigmatizing in a society where the worship of ancestors is at the forefront of the culture, and those on the sexual outskirts of tradition who might not continue the family line and inhabit a sort of marginal sexual space face immense pressure and scrutiny from family and society. Indonesian men who exhibit female traits or live as women, but are not necessarily homosexual or transgender, although some may be, are labeled as waria, and Christina talked about that term earlier. In many cases, they are referred to by the less culturally sensitive label banci. While banci refers to a kind of person who has the characteristics of the opposite sex, it has been adopted to describe Balinese dance as well. So Balinese dance is classified into 3 different types. There is male dance on the left, and you can see the sort of wide stance. Some of these things that Christina talked about also, wide stance, wide eyes, wide fingers, very like bold presence. Female, closer stance, refined features, slender body, and then also a in-between or babancihan dance. And according to Balinese dancer and scholar Iwayan Dibia, use of the word banci to become the root of the word babancihan started at the Balinese High School for the Performing Arts, Kokar, in 1960s to categorize dances in which characters cross-dress. They either cross-dress or it refers to a dance that shows a mix of both female and male gender characteristics, such as when a man dances in a halus or refined manner that mimics the flowing movements of the female form, or when a female performer dances in a very karas or rigid manner, mimicking the masculinity and power of male dance. So it's interesting that this term has since stuck and has been used to refer to a number of different styles of dance in Bali, but the history of cross-dressing in dance performances in Indonesia long predates the development of this term babancihan. Several noteworthy studies document cross-dress dance roles in East Java from 1820s to the present, including Sunardi's, Peugeot, Blackwood, Razek. In Bali, the dramatic form known as arja was developed in 1825 and was only danced by men until the 1920s. This all-male dance drama called Arja Mawani fused singing and dance to portray Javanese folk tales and Indian epics. And although men danced the roles of female characters, they were expected to dance in a refined and halus manner and portray the image of the ideal woman. And this is an important point because when we see these contemporary dancers dancing as females, they're not necessarily dancing in the image of an ideal woman. In the 1920s, Arja Mawani groups began to disappear as female characters were added to attract more attention and reach the high pitches in the singing or machapat. It was also during this time that other cross-dress dance styles began to emerge. For example, the illustrious dancer I Nyoman Mario created the famous Kabyar Duduk dance, which involves a male dancer portraying a female character flirting or ngibing with the musicians of the gamelan orchestra. And you can see here, this is Mario, a very illustrious dancer, and although he was male, the sort of contour of the body, the slender figure, and the very sort of halus, refined manner in which he's holding the fan and presenting his hands just made him an exceptional person to dance these kind of dances. Several dances in which women cross-dress as males or dance in the male style were choreographed by the famous dancer I Nyoman Kaler and include just a couple here, Margapati, Taruna Jaya on the left, Panji Samirang on the right, Damang Miring, and Wiranata. And see, these are very common Balinese dances that are performed by women dressed as male figures and displaying very male-style dance forms. In 1992, the all-male dance drama Arja Mawani of the 1920s made a comeback. Arja Mawani groups such as Arja Mawani Printing Mas, Arja Chowok Akachanging, and Arja Chowok Choglong Pamor followed the traditional structure of classical Arja. However, the goal of these groups was to transform serious Arja into comedic entertainment by highlighting jokes and comedic characters. According to EY and Dibia, this ruined serious and refined halus characters who were often models of an ideal woman or Indonesian citizen, as they were transformed to become unrefined, keras, and humorous. As a result, comedic cross-dressed characters like the Liku or the princess and Desak Rai, the princess's servant, became more of a focus. And you can see that here on the right. These two would be Liku and Desak Rai. EY Andibia, one of my informants and a scholar and professor of dance at the Balinese Arts University, termed this shift from serious arja to entertainment arja as tragicomedy or serio-comic, and renamed the genre arja lucu, or funny arja, or dramatari lawak, comedic drama. The development of these characters represents two things. One, a transformation of the dance drama for entertainment purposes, which according to Dibia mirrors developments in Balinese society, because as Bali modernized, many people moved from agrarian work in rice fields to urban office jobs and had less time for extensive arja performances. They also preferred comedic dramas over serious ones to balance their stressful lives. Secondly, these changes mark significant changes to the traditional function of dance drama characters. Characters like Liku and Desak Rai, again the princess and the servant, who were once exemplars of morals and virtues, now act in immoral ways and transgress social norms by portraying behaviors that are dishonest, naughty, eccentric, and liking to disobey ethics and social norms in order to invoke comedy. The cross-dressed characters also inhabit a space where it is socially acceptable for a woman to speak in a harsh manner, move their body in sexual ways, and draw on lewd jokes in impolite language to invoke humor. It is the very fact that the dancer is portraying a woman as a man, portraying a woman, and acting in an appropriate manner, that comedy is invoked. As in everyday life, this behavior would not be socially acceptable, and you would rarely, if ever, find a woman acting in such a way. Today, several of these Liku and Desak Rai Babanjihan dancers have thriving careers performing for arja and other forms of dance drama, such as Chalonarang. This involves trance, and it's a story about black magic and the forces of good and evil. Prembon, or masked arja, Sendrachari, which translates as art, theater, and dance. These performers, oops, I went the wrong way, sorry. These performers, a couple of which you can see here, are often also invited to perform by themselves outside of dance drama as a kind of duo in a sort of stand-up comedy for weddings and parties, or as MCs for formal meetings, hotel openings, business anniversaries. Many of the top dancers go by a stage name that signifies their cross-dressed role and character. The name usually begins with the Balinese word gek, which signifies a beautiful young woman. Notable stars are Gek Sakar, Gek Kiki, Tu Gek Munti, Gek Rempong, Gek Chingklong, Gek Churling, Gek Shirley, and Gek Lasan. And I've interviewed three of them and will present them in a moment. In interviews with these well-known performers, I have sought to understand their attitudes about Babanjihan dance and explore how they navigate Balinese and Indonesian ideological tensions surrounding gender and sexuality, and how that might tie into their own sexuality. From preliminary interviews with three dancers, I have found that there's a wide spectrum of sexuality that these dancers identify with off stage, including married biological males who have male characteristics, males who exhibit female traits and may be considered waria or banchi, and those who have actually undergone changing from a man to a woman through Botox, hormones, and surgery, who are referred to as transpuan, taken from the words transgender and perempuan, or woman. I Gede Koman Kartonayasa from the village of Buahan Tabanan goes by the stage name Gek Sakar, and he was actually one of the first arja comedic dancers to really make a career doing this. And I'm just going to present a little bit of his story. He explained that in college he was asked to perform as a Liku dancer and his parents didn't allow him. And that just shows some of the stigmatization around these cross-dressed roles in Balinese dance, that parents and brothers and relatives are like, no, don't do that, you're a man, why would you want to dance a female character? So they didn't allow him because the Liku character had a negative connotation. quote unquote. He joined the group as a different character, eventually dancing as the Liku character, but lied to his parents and snuck around for 3 years. His brother also didn't want him to dance a female role because he had been chased by a homosexual Liku dancer and had been traumatized. I want to show you a video of Kartonoyasa performing the Liku character in a Prembon performance at the 2021 Bali Arts Festival, where he, you can hear he comments in a very fast feminine voice on his quote-unquote night name, or sekar, and in a masculine voice he mentions his daytime name, which is Kartonoyasa. This is a commentary on his hidden female personality. Notice his cross-dressed costume and the fast-paced feminine speaking voice of the Liku character. Just interesting. Kartonoyasa was one of the first to emerge as a Liku freelancer and often invited to perform for these weddings, formal meetings, and other dance drama styles. He also has a very lucrative salon and a makeup and hair business as well. Another Liku dancer is I Made Murtayasa, who goes by the stage name Tuget Munti. He began studying female dance because only female dances were being taught in his village. He also joined a drama Gong group acting as the estranged wife of the king, and the community loved him and supported him. His parents also supported him because he wasn't following in the footsteps of his brother, who were praemon or gangsters. Although his parents supported him, his brother would often say, "Please don't be like a woman, and don't do any dances that are related to a woman character because you might turn into that." Between him and Kartonoyasa, we can clearly see little support from the community to dance these controversial roles, although these male-identifying individuals are really just doing this, as Christina had mentioned in her paper, for work, as their job. Another dancer is Iwayanriki Awan Pratama, or Gek Kiki. This is quite different from Kartonoyasa and Murtayasa, as she is a transgender Liku dancer who has begun the process of becoming a woman. Her upbringing was very difficult. Her parents divorced and she was forced to move out of the compound, and in her isolation she really struggled mentally. They didn't support her dancing the female character, but she continued to do so and hid it from them. She tried to go to art school and was not allowed, but eventually she hid her makeup and costumes at a friend's house and continued performing, and was eventually caught because someone saw her on social media and in the newspaper as she rose to fame. She was caught. The family was confused and angry and wanted to burn her galungan headdress, saying, quote, "You are a man, why do you want to dance as a woman?" Others called her an artist kampong, or a village dancer, or commenting on the fact that maybe she was performing sexual prostitution at night, which many of these dancers that sort of have that connotation, if you're a warrior, that you might be some sort of sex worker. Someone even threw a water bottle at her and said, "Aduh, itu sampah masyarakat," or the trash of society. Despite this, her parents now accept her, perhaps because now she's famous and the village recognizes her as a famous dancer. And I've seen this more increasingly as I've gotten to know some of these dancers, that they met with a real stigma and pushback from their families, but now that they've rose to fame, it's become more and more socially accepted. While being a Liku dancer does not mean that one is transgender or homosexual, Kiki is a good example of a dancer who is undergoing transformation. The existence of transvestites has a long history in Indonesia and have long been marginalized, especially by Muslim fundamentalists in Java. She is considered a transpuan, which is taken from the words, as I mentioned, transgender and perempuan, or woman, and refers to being in a state of transition. She does not want to be considered homosexual and eventually wants to undergo surgery to become a woman and be able to marry. Official laws concerning the legalization of homosexuality in Indonesia are not likely to change anytime soon, and because of the politicization of religion in the Indonesian constitution, or Pancasila, the first principle, belief in one God, makes religion part of nationalism in Indonesia, and none of the recognized religions accept homosexuality. Therefore, legalization of homosexuality would require a change to the constitution. In the third aspect of my project, I'm exploring the role that these dancers are playing in local and national ideas of gender. Historically, national gendered ideologies in Indonesia have been informed and upheld by the state. And as Christina Sunardi and Evelyn Blackwood mention out, mapping of maleness to men's bodies and femaleness to women's bodies in dance drama has been one way that the Indonesian government has shaped discourses and gender ideologies since Indonesian independence in 1945. As Sunardi's study shows, earlier generations of cross-dressers from East Java throughout the 1940s to 1990s have continued to uphold state constructions of gender, and this is arguably true of Balinese dance, even cross-dress dance, until the 1990s. However, Sunardi and several others note that embodying the characteristics of the opposite sex through cross-dress dance is also one way in which individuals can resist state-sanctioned constructions of gender, and this is certainly the case amongst these comedic cross-dressers. It is clear from preliminary observations that these dancers are not necessarily portraying the refined feminine qualities of the ideal woman, as cross-dressing dancers of the past had done. Given the extremely large audiences that these dancers are reaching through their YouTube shows and social media accounts, screenshots of several which you can see here, some with over 80,000 followers. Kartono Yasa actually had like 100 and some, maybe 180,000 he said, but then he was hacked, so he had to start over. These mediascapes, whether they're YouTube or Instagram, are really important sites for cultural production and gender discourse, and represent spaces for individuals like these dancers to transgress gender, dominant gender ideologies, and shape the attitudes nationally towards sexuality in Indonesia at the local and international levels. It's really hard to gauge the degree to which whether there's a growing acceptance of this or not, but the number of followers of these dancers perhaps is a testament to a growing acceptance of these dancers and national opinions regarding sexuality. My collaborator, Iwayan Sudirana, actually, we polled 150 Balinese students at the Balinese Arts University to get a sense of what they think about Liku dancers, and a majority. You can see and I know it's in Indonesian, but I'll give you a little bit of a rundown here. A majority either had no opinion or liked the dance. However, about 27% still thought it was strange. So the top one here that says, this is weird, it's a little bit off, and I don't really like it. So 4% said that. It's weird, but I like it. 21% said that that's what they thought about this cross-dress dancers. I don't have an opinion. 2.7%. It's whatever. 23%. I like it, 17%, and I like it because it has some important cultural points to it. There's a number of other. But what this short poll does is kind of just maybe potentially shows that there's a little bit more of a growing acceptance towards this, and just towards sexual fluidity in general. Based on our interviews, social acceptance of Liku dancers and LGBTQ sexuality in general seems to be connected to a growing urban and cosmopolitan culture, as all of our informants felt that they had to hide in the city of Denpasar and be away from the judgment of the rural village communities where the tenets of Balinese Hinduism and the sort of responsibility to live up to like family norms and the temple were much stronger. The anonymity that urban areas like Denpasar provide and the city provides allowed them to be able to be themselves and express themselves as dancers and in whatever sort of sexual light that they saw themselves in. An element of globalization is at play here as well, as the internet and social media such as Instagram have allowed Balinese people to see open displays of sexuality from around the world. This has led to more freedom of expression in Bali and through Balinese social media and YouTube. I'd like to end with a short video of two of the dancers that I introduced briefly, Kartono Yasa and Myrta Jayak. They actually have a YouTube channel that they perform on together. And while these artistic spaces may not completely erase stigma towards sexuality and cross-dressing in Bali, they do demonstrate an artistic space for the Balinese Banci and the enormous visibility that they have. And as I mentioned, some of these artists are the most well-paid in Bali. So I'm still developing this project and plan to conduct several more interviews this summer with even more famous dancers. So any questions and comments are welcome, but let's just have a look at these. This was an endorsement that these two dancers did for a dentist office.
Klinik Kamandani Dental Beauty.
Oh, klinik Kamandani ya.
I shortened it for you guys.
Coba lagi ya. Coba kamu.
All right, yeah, just a short clip. Thank you.
Thank you, Meghan. Now that we have presented two contrasting styles of Indonesian dance and performing arts, we'd like to open the discussion to the panel and to the audience. Laurel, would you like to start the discussion? And I can run the mic up there.
Yeah, we can do that.
Is Christina still there? Can she still hear us? Hi.
Yes, I can hear you.
My first question is for you. You know, clearly your research focuses more on the Muslim tradition, and Meghan presented this concept that's based in the Hindu tradition of Indonesia. And I'm just wondering what cultural, you know, you're familiar with much of Indonesia, I know, and like general like cultural behavior. And I'm wondering what similarities can you draw on the cultural appropriateness of cross-gender dance, despite this huge religious difference between these two islands and cultural examples?
Yeah, that's such a great question. There's a number of thoughts come to mind, and I really appreciate Megan's point that, you know, like in Indonesia, like you have to be a religion, like it's on your ID card, so you have to declare a religion. And as she highlighted, like homosexuality, cross-dressing, it's not sanctioned in any of the religions, you know, so we're talking like Islam and Hinduism, of course, Catholicism, Protestantism, Buddhism, and more recently, Confucianism, right? And so, in some ways, like me going there and being like, oh, how can cross-gender dance exist in a Muslim context? I think Tom Velstrup actually writes this. Like, you could ask the same question in the United States because it's, you know, like if you're a primarily Christian society, like how can sort of like cross-genderness or transgender or, you know, homosexual, how can it exist here? And we certainly are seeing a backlash to, you know, LGBTQ plus folks in the US right now, which we can also kind of talk about. So I really appreciate Megan's point that like there isn't really a religion where that's like, on the one hand, in sort of day-to-day life, sort of like explicitly sort of tolerated, although individuals certainly have their own approaches, as you know, we were both, you know, speaking about. However, as Meghan talked about with the sort of ideas of like the Hindu deities and the importance of androgyny in, you know, in some of the deities, especially like Shiva and Parvati, I think that is also a really important component in cross-gender performance and androgyny. transvestism, kind of the recognition of Wadia as a gender category is because there are very deep Hindu roots in Java as well. So I find that connection really, really interesting. And sort of culturally too, I mean, this is going back like several hundred years, so I'd have to think about this a little bit more, but there's a lot of really interesting historical connections between East Java and Bali too, kind of when there was like a really powerful empire that was centered in East Java called Mojopahit, not too far from Malang actually, but as that court was falling, some of the people from that court relocated to Bali, and so brought a lot of like Javanese culture with them. And Mojopahit was a Hindu court, although Islam was starting to kind of come in, kind of towards the end of the Mojopahit period. So there are some really important connections, I think, also to Hinduism, and then the sort of national culture. It's kind of an interesting construct to also think about in terms of, in many ways I would dare say that the national culture is pretty dominantly Javanese. Like all of the presidents of Indonesia have been Javanese, and people from other cultures have certainly felt that Javanese dominance in politics. The capital is like on the island of Java and stuff like that. So I think about the impact of Javanese notions of respectability and propriety, and like how that has been imposed on like the rest of the country. And even within Java, the notions of sort of central Javanese, like the court culture that you were talking about at the very beginning, and like the emphasis on refinement, sometimes that doesn't resonate with other people even within Java, like the East Javanese. The people in Malang sort of prided themselves on being coarse or kasar. And you find this in other parts of Java, and people like Andy Sutton have written about this as well. And so kind of these ideas of Javanese politeness and attitudes and things like that, like I said, they don't really resonate with everyone. So one thing that I also think about too is, how much expression are we seeing of local identity? Especially in like Beskala and Remo in East Java, that are so closely connected to East Javanese-ness. There's some of that too. I don't know, am I answering your question, or am I kind of, I hope I'm not rambling.
No, I think you did. And in fact, you touched upon this kind of overwhelming Javanese-ness that has spread over all of Java and into Bali. And one thing that I really think about when I was in Central Java and kind of met people and kind of experienced the culture, and even talking to my mentors and stuff, is that kind of the culture in Central Java, at least, is that yes, you are Javanese first, and even though you have to identify a certain religion on your card, your spirituality is Javanese-ness first. And part of that centuries-old tradition is of being, right here in the spice trade, where you're getting people from all over the world traveling through, is Indonesians and Javanese in particular have been able to take what they want from certain religions. So like both of you kind of talked about how people who are doing cross-gender dance for work, they're able to rationalize it in kind of that same way. Like, well, this works for me, so let's go forward with it, So I kind of see that similarity between these two parts of Indonesia as well. Cool. Does anybody out there have any questions? And it can be a simple question about, who our panelists are, or what they do, or what you've read today. Go ahead and take the mic out, and let's see what kind of questions we've got out there. Thank you. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Saul Garcia, and I'm a folk musician as well, so this is a question that we kind of just wondering, as for you as an academic, Dr. Hynson, have you faced any challenges or limitations when presenting culture's evolving art form in an academic setting?
Can you say it one more time?
Have you faced any challenges or limitations when presenting a culture's evolving art form in an academic setting?
Oh gosh, I mean, sure. Being an ethnomusicologist and an American woman, I think is always just a challenge in and of itself. As someone who's an outsider who goes to Indonesia and learns the language and participates in the traditions and performs the music and does my best to learn as much as I can about it to then present it to all of you in the best way that I can. I think that's always a challenge because no matter what, I'm not Balinese. And I think that's something that I'm always trying to negotiate as an academic and as someone who does this work. But you do the best you can.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Great question.
Hello, my name is Christian here. I had a question about, I think a lot of the discussion was about the expressions of genders through the dancers and with the musicians working in a supporting role. And I was curious if there is a history of people who alternate between these roles, being able to express themselves more outwardly as dancers and conserving perhaps the identity through, or being in a more supportive capacity as musicians.
So a person who can navigate these gender issues through also navigating life as a dancer and a musician, you mean?
Yeah, I was wondering, is it really that people really select only one of the roles, or can people also alternate between both of them?
I could jump in really quick. I mean, at least in the context of Bali, and then maybe Christina can from what I've observed, if you're the dancer, you're usually showing up to be the dancer. Does that mean you can't play gamelan? No. But I think when you dedicate enough of your time and your energy and your life, especially to rise to this certain level of professionalism and to notoriety, to gain a following and become this famous, you're just focusing on being the dancer. You're not really playing the gamelan as well. And there's so much that's involved in dancing. You show up to a performance several hours ahead of time to put all of the makeup on, to put all of the dress on. So it really involves a large commitment. It's not as easy as just like, oh, today I'm gonna drum, or today I feel like I'm gonna dance. And there's so much training that's involved too. Even with these comedic dancers who seem like they're just sort of improvising, there's a whole format of they have to know how the Chalonarong or the Arja performance goes. They have to sing in a very stylized way, and they do have to insert their comedy within a certain formula of how the dance would normally progress or within the story. So there's an extensive amount of training that would involve becoming a dancer, so that you would normally focus on one or the other. But yeah, that's not to say that they don't know how to play gamelan. That's a good question though. Christina?
Oh yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, one of the reasons I was drawn to do my research in Indonesia was to think about the music and dance relationship. And so many of the dancers that I interviewed, not all of them, but many of them were pretty, they were pretty fluent in gamelan, and that they knew the basic melody, and a lot of them could play at least a little bit, and they knew the drumming pretty well from the dance, and they could at least sing the drum patterns. Some of them could also play the drum. But kind of like what Meghan was saying, usually people were, the master musicians that I studied with, they were hired as musicians, and most of them could not dance. Some of the dancers that I worked with, like I said, they could play the drum or sing through it. There were some dancers who were also very good musicians, and sometimes would be hired to dance and sometimes be hired to play gamelan. It was interesting because a couple of male artists that I interviewed that identified as men, they were kind of an older generation, and they performed female roles. They talked about performing as female singers in gamelan performances and dressing, that role is called Pesinden or Warangono. And so they talked about taking that role in gamelan ensemble. So they maintained a sort of, they were sort of like cross-gender singers, basically, and they would sing in like falsetto to sing the high range of the female singers. So that was pretty interesting. And they talked about doing that in the past when they were younger. And one of my dance teachers, who also would sing female parts, he learned everything he knew about music and dance from his grandmother. And he talked about how she used to be like a really, really good drummer. And she would teach people to play the drum for Beskal and Putri. So as the story goes, she received that dance from a spirit when she was a child. So she received the dance, the music, the drumming patterns, the lyrics, like all the movements, and then she taught other people how to do it. So she knew the drumming and would teach it. He did not talk about her being a professional drummer. He always talked about her, like in terms of performance, she would, perform the dance. And that dance does involve singing as well, but she knew the drum, and he said that she was a really great drummer. So to me, that was really interesting because drumming is such a male-dominated activity. And while you do find women who can drum, still most of the professional drummers are male. And like if you see a female drummer like on a YouTube video or is featured somewhere, she's usually featured as sort of an anomaly. Like, check out this woman drummer, check out this girl, and she can drum, and it's very much compared like she sounds like a man. And when I was drumming, they found a littler drum for me, like a smaller size drum, because they didn't want me to overexert myself playing a big drum, or that's what my woman's hands could handle. And the compliments that I got was like, oh, you drum like a man, So there was some elements of kind of crossing gender expectations there as well. And I think there's a lot of space to talk about that, and I haven't really delved into that so much, although there is a literature on women's gamelan groups in Java and in Bali, some of which have women drummers. Those groups, they're called Ibu-Ibu groups, and like women's or mothers groups. And usually, I don't want to say always, usually they're known or assumed to be kind of more at an amateur level than at like the top professional level. Although they'll be invited to perform for weddings or for the radio station or something like that. But a lot of the participants, I don't want to say all of them, but in many cases, they also tend to have a more casual relationship with the music. Like it's an activity, it's a reason to get together and have a nice evening with other women. Very often they have a professional male teacher who's sort of their leader and maybe plays the drum or more difficult instruments. So they're not, I would argue they're not really transgressing gender boundaries, but they are creating a space for women to be musicians with other women. In Bali, Sonia Downing has written about girls' gamelans, and some of them are and now they're young women, but they're quite good and are, so that's like a whole other thing too.
Yeah, good question. Another question?
Hi, I'm Kelton Shea. I was curious, I know you each talked a little bit about the gender and dance aspects of the Japanese and Balinese gamelan ensembles. I was curious more on the instrumental side, like what differentiates them and what makes them different.
The gamelan music itself?
Yeah, just between the different regions.
Oh yeah, well you're going to definitely hear that if you come to the Oh My Gong Festival on Saturday. Yeah, there's great diversity of music and all performing arts throughout Indonesia. And Java and Bali that we discussed today, they're neighbors. You can literally see the island from the other shore. So they're very, very close but starkly different, not just religiously, but the performing tradition is very different. I mentioned briefly the Central Javanese tradition that there's going to be 2 Central Javanese gamelans on Saturday's events. That's a tradition born from the royal courts of Central Java, these two sister royal cities. And that's considered like very refined, and part of the aesthetic is to be almost this like slow kind of meditative quality, and oftentimes people do fall asleep, and that's the aesthetic that they're going for. So a lot of people, especially foreigners, Westerners, might think of it as more of like a sleepy kind of music because it feels slow, but there's a lot of depth and intricacies within that layering of that slower pulse of time. Contrasting, the Balinese style is very energetic and flamboyant and bright and very dynamic, loud to soft and ever-changing. So they're like night and day, really. So you'll see both of those on Saturday.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gretchen.
Hi, Gretchen.
Hi.
Gretchen is in our SDSU Javanese Gamelan ensemble.
Yeah, but
Cool.
so I wanted to make a comment first and then a question.
Okay.
And like I don't mean that to be rude in any way at all, but I am LGBT and saying transvestite is very like not cool anymore. Just an FYI. I know that times keep changing, but yeah, it's pretty derogatory now. Just an FYI. But also, I want to say, is it similar to essentially it's drag queens in America? Question mark. Essentially, am I wrong?
No, because at least in the context of Bali, there's a whole other sort of drag community that performs in different spaces.
Okay, so would you say it's different in the sense that it's more cultural and like religious based in a sense?
Yeah. Because they're performing in these dance drama, like the Cholonarong would be for a specific ceremony. I didn't get into this, I didn't have enough time, but the Cholonarong dance would be for like a temple ceremony that would be marking the temple's anniversary, so they'd perform for that. Or the same thing with the Arja or the Prambon or the Senjatari, they're usually like more culturally specific performance types versus like the drag show as we know it is more of just like a comedic entertainment space at like a club or a restaurant or something like that.
Okay, no, I was just very curious.
Yeah, it's a great question.
The differences. All right, thank you.
And I appreciate your comment.
Oh, of course. I know I understand.
Yes, thank you.
Hi there, my name is Noel Atkins. I have a question for Professor Laurel. When researching the Javanese culture, I was just curious, do you have an interesting fact for us?
An interesting fact on Javanese culture? Gosh, well, I've got a lot of stories that I've received over time, and especially with my guru, Pak Joko Waluyo. I kind of just stumbled upon studying Indonesian gamelan. I'm a drummer by trade. I play jazz drum set. I went to West Africa to study West African drumming, and I thought that's what I was going to do. And when I stumbled upon the music of Indonesia and started working with Pak Joko, I really didn't know anything about Indonesia. But one of the cool things I like to kind of think about is kind of what I reflected on a minute ago with how the Javanese can kind of select things that apply to them. But I also love like this image that I always get from my teacher of mysticism and how strong mysticism is held to Central Javanese people. And so there's just like a lot of really great stories of kind of like magic happening to him, my teacher, in different ways, or other individuals. So I don't know. I don't know if that really answers your question, but that's one of the things that like really kind of sparks me and makes me like feel like Indonesian music is magic, is because I feel like this magical connection to the way that my teacher experiences life. So.
Hi, my name is Marquis Scott. I have a question for Dr. Hynson. I know you mentioned that you conducted multiple interviews and you're planning to conduct more this summer.
Yeah.
What is your goal or plans after all these interviews? Like, do you have any goals or any plans that you want to move forward with?
Yeah, you know, I'd like to probably publish an article about this. There are a lot of, like as Christina was saying, there's a lot of studies on multiple aspects of music and gender in Bali, but as far as I know, no one has really done a serious study of these newer comedic cross-dressing characters. So I plan on doing a few more interviews with some of the top performers, with my collaborator in Bali, and you know, do the best we can to maybe reinterpret some of the data and some of the interviews and publish it, and publish, you know, their voices, publish some of the things that they're saying about their performances and how they see themselves and how they negotiate these tensions around sexuality and gender in Bali. But yeah, the goal for most of us as academics is to publish a paper or a book.
One more quick question.
Yeah.
It's hard to get the interviews, but like, do you get any rejection?
Yeah, so honestly, it's one of the reasons why I'm doing this with a Balinese partner, another scholar who's also a professor at the Balinese Arts University. Given the fact that this is such a sensitive topic, I didn't want to go in as someone who, you know, I speak Indonesian, but am I perfectly fluent in Indonesian? No, and for that matter, a lot of people speak Balinese. So I'm working with someone who is very good and culturally sensitive at approaching this subject with our interviewees, and you know, we've also we sat down for a good few hours talking about, well, like, how are we going to present this project to these dancers, because we don't want to sort of hurt any feelings or make any mistakes, or like, it's a really great question. And even before, you know, as academics, before you go and you do these research projects, you're supposed to do what's called an IRB, which is like a human subjects. What do they call them? It's something that it's a summary of your work that shows that you're not going to bring any harm to the people that you're interviewing. And so that was also a very interesting process in, like, you know, what kind of questions are you going to ask? How are you going to present your research to these people, to the people who you're interviewing, so that you protect them and protect their identities if they want to be named in the research or not. There's all of that kind of stuff too. So yeah, really great question. Really sensitive subject.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Sydney.
Sorry. Go ahead.
My name is Sydney, and I just wanted to know, with all the negative connotations, what are some of, like, maybe one or two common influences or encouraging, like, I guess, like, situations that make people want to continue on as, like, these dancers, if that makes sense?
Christina, do you want to comment on that maybe?
Yeah, I couldn't quite hear everything. So like an incentive for people to continue on as what?
Not really incentive, just like what encourages these people to, I mean, not really, like what are maybe some influences on why they would want to continue, you know, in the footsteps of these famous dancers?
Yeah, despite their hardship,
all the negative connotations.
despite the stigma, maybe, yeah.
Oh, of being just dancers in general?
Yeah.
Or cross-dressing.
Do you cross-gender dance?
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's interesting because where I was in Malang, being a cross-gender dancer was not like, I mean, except for some of the most fundamental Muslims, it was not like controversial. And I'm talking like people who are just like really, really super fundamental. And for that community of people, just the arts in general was something that they didn't really think people should do because it would distract them from thinking about Islam. You know, like, so instead of participating in the arts, people should be going to prayer sessions, for example. So that was more the exception to the rule. For most people that I encountered, including artists too, they were like really proud to be continuing East Javanese traditional dances and like maintaining that and continuing it. And they really saw it as part of their culture, part of their tradition. And the cross-gender aspect of it for some of the dances was also just part of the tradition. Where things got a little bit stickier was when people would take the cross-genderness off stage. And again, for example, for men or male-bodied people who identified as men, if they were performing female-style dance, like they didn't really encounter too much trouble in their communities as far as what the ones I interviewed communicated to me. However, Wadia spoke to discrimination, and a lot of dancers, including Wadia artists, also make a living by being beauticians. So doing makeup for weddings, because that makeup can be very complicated. So dancers have that knowledge of how to do this complicated makeup and hairstyles, and know the different types of outfits and stuff that are appropriate for weddings. And so one Wadia dancer talked to me, who was also a beautician, like talked to me about how like some people believe that that's not allowed in Islam, or like you shouldn't be doing that. And so some people like used Islam as a reason to not hire a Wadia beautician, but other people were fine with it and hired them. So as far as encouragement to participate in the arts, I think a lot of it, for a lot of the people that I interviewed, it was such an important part of their culture. They were proud to be East Javanese, and they were proud to be from Malang, and they wanted to continue their culture. Also, in East Java, there's a lot of Central Javanese influence in the arts, and there was a fear among many of the performers that I spoke with that their arts were going to be lost, and the Central Javanese arts were going to be they were going to be dominant. Well, they already were dominant, but were going to like take over, and younger people weren't learning the full traditional like Remo and Beskalan, so there was a real concern about cultural preservation. So there was that. Also, being an artist can be a source of income for people, so there's definitely that motivation. And some people talked about the community aspect of it, like the musicians, like they enjoy getting together with their friends and playing music, or the dancers talked about, they chit-chat backstage while they're doing their makeup, and they get out of the house, it gives them something to do, so they enjoy that aspect of it as well. And for the performers that I talked to, the men, male-bodied, assigned male at birth performers that I spoke with, they talked about performing female-style dances also being really important. I mean, they didn't put it in these terms. Maybe they would now, but I was doing field work like a while ago at this point, 2005, 6, 7. But the way they spoke to it, it was something that was really important to their mental health. Because so many of them, even if they didn't identify as a Wadia, they recognized on some level like these feminine qualities to their personality. And Meghan talked about this too, like being in cities in some ways was a lot more, like people felt a lot more acceptance, or at least they were maybe ignored because they were kind of anonymous in the city. Whereas in the village, this was similar too in Java, the village culture to sort of conform and to raise a family, it was just so strong. I mean, it was so oppressive for some people. There were stories that I heard of people who might in the city have identified openly as a Wadia who were forced to marry a woman and they committed suicide. It's kind of like stories that we hear, in the United States of that pressure can lead to, such tragic outcomes. So being on stage, particularly in a village community, and being able to dress as a woman and act in a feminine manner was a really important aspect of realizing what some people talked about as their women's soul, or they were talked about as having women's blood. So being able to embody that and sort of celebrate that, even temporarily, was really important for a lot of people as well. Now, I did not meet any female-bodied individuals or female assigned at birth individuals who identified as, in Indonesia, they're called tomboys. So females who live and dress as men. Evelyn Blackwood writes about tomboys in Sumatra, if you're interested in reading that study or series of studies. I did not encounter anybody who identified, to me anyway, as a tomboy, although that identity category is much less visible than the Waria category, at least in Java. And Blackwood writes about that in Sumatra as well. The women that I met that talked about really enjoying performing male-style dance talked about how they, as women, they identified as women, but they identified as being like go-getters. Like they didn't want to just sit around and wait for things to happen. They were like go-getters. They were active. They weren't quiet. They knew what they wanted. And so they were like some of these descriptors that were very often linked with masculinity in dominant Indonesian discourse. Now, in sort of traditional Javanese culture, if you go back, like centuries and stuff like that, like I said, it's not uncommon. I mean, you find these histories of women being soldiers and traders and, running their households, and they still do in many contexts. So it's not kind of beyond the realm of womanhood. But in the dominant Indonesian discourses is, something different. But anyway, so they talked about being opinionated and go-getters, and also they found female-style costuming very restrictive. Like they didn't like the tight, well, it's called like kain panjang, but like the batik, like long cloths that's wrapped in a very tight skirt for some dances. Like they didn't like that, and they found the movement restrictive, and like they couldn't do these like really small movements, and they liked the big movements of male-style dance. So that was something that also was like liberating for them. So something that was also a motivator. Again, I feel like I might be rambling, so maybe I should stop.
Thank you. You guys, I think we have time for, I see two, you've been raising your hand, you have the microphone now, so we're going to take two more questions. Thank you so much. So you have the mic now, go ahead.
My name is Sonia Ordish. My question is, what made you focus on Javanese, or do you have other research interests?
Who are you asking? Everybody?
Yeah. Mostly Megan and Christina.
Okay, why don't you go ahead?
I always say that Bali chose me. I was in college, and a series of coincidences led to me to get a scholarship. I had gone to Bali actually just for fun on vacation, and I absolutely fell in love with the culture and the people, and was just fascinated by the vibrant ritual life of these people. And then I came home and and had a professor at college who had just come into my university, and she was a Balinese music specialist. I managed to get a grant to go to Bali right after I graduated, and just all these things kind of like fell in line for me to go to Bali. I lived in Bali for 5 years after my undergraduate degree, and so people always ask me, why did you choose Bali? And I have a hard time answering that question. I mean, it's the Hindu yogic lifestyle and the really ritual-oriented life of the people, and just like they're beautiful people, and it's a beautiful island too. It's a beautiful place to be and to live. But I also think that there was an element of just like it choosing me and all these things aligning in my life that allowed me to spend that much time and to go there and to study there. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, we're going to take one more question. You've been diligently raising your hand. Thank you.
My name is, no, it's okay. My name is Leona Berkholz. My question was, I was wondering if you guys could elaborate a little bit more on the collaboration between the gamelan ensemble here at SDSU and with different schools around California. I know USD, and also you mentioned CalArts earlier. Like, what kind of work have you guys done?
Yeah, so it has been, I lovingly like to call it an incestuous community, because many of us have, like I've performed with CalArts, and it's mostly because of these three main teachers, Pak Joko Waluyo, Inyoman Wenton, and his wife Nanik Wenton. They have been the primary teachers at all of these universities. So as we are learning, then we're called upon to be guest musicians at other schools to help reinforce. At SDSU in particular, we used to have Balinese gamelan and Javanese gamelan, and we had dance. And now we have Javanese gamelan and no dance. So I often rely on my colleagues at CalArts and UCLA to coordinate guest dancers to come to SDSU, and even our guest dancers, and many of the guests that we'll see on Saturday have all gifted each other this experience of being an extra man in the demung section, or having another dancer for like perhaps a female dance that requires 5 females or something. So we're all just kind of learning and growing together here in Southern California, and so we're able to really pool our resources and share that. So that's why our community is so tight, and I'm so thankful to be a part of it. Yeah. Thank you for that.
And to add that, I went to UCLA for my PhD, so I studied with Pat Wenton, and I also would go to Borat Wangi, which is a community gamelan at CalArts on the weekends during grad school. And now that I direct the USD gamelan, I'm also often inviting Pat Wenton or Hirotaka Inusuka from Gamelan Merdu Kamala to come down and to dance with my group. Or, we're all kind of connected, and we all specialize and do different things. So depending on what our programs are doing or what they need, we all work together and perform with one another. And it's just a lovely community.
It's a great community. Thank you so much. I really appreciate each of you who have stayed here till the end with us. This has been a really exciting discussion. Thank you so much, Christina and Meghan, for your contributions today. I really learned a lot, and I thought it was so exciting, and now I'm like, wow, I need to get some guest lectures in my class or something. It's so fun. So thank you all so much for your time. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to Michael, our moderator, and everybody else who helped tonight, especially the tech team. Have a great evening, and thanks again for coming. Thanks, Christina.
Someday soon.
Yes, SEM conference.
Yeah,
Ottawa.
hopefully we'll see.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to make it to Ontario. But hopefully sometime soon. Anyway.
Yes.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you. I really enjoyed your presentation.